meeting is going to be packed with information. We have before us 5 bills that are part of a child care package that has, there's been some publicity around it, and the speaker is very excited about it. They are differing bills, and our job today is going to be to get a sense of what the bills are about, and then listen to some suggestions for amendments that we might do, and you'll have time to think about more. It's not really my intent, unless we are really comfortable and really settle in nicely, to vote on these bills or other amendments at this particular meeting. We'll probably meet again later in the week after you've had a little time to think about what was said here. There is some from leadership. There are some, they want some alacrity. They want us to move a little bit quickly on these if we can. So we'll probably take them up later in the week with some more seriousness, but we need some serious input. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to name the bill and tell you a little bit about it overall. And then I'm going to turn it over to Alistair, and he's going to talk about some of the vagaries of it and maybe some of the things that we think need to be amended onto the bill, or some things that need to be changed about it. This is going to be packed with info. So normally we just wait for all of that. But if you find yourself getting in the weeds a little bit on what we're talking about, raise your hand and we'll try to stop Alistair at a good spot and see if you can sneak your question in. If you have to save them all for the end, sometimes they're not quite as relevant at that moment. So just let me know if you have something that you need explained. We're not going to take them in exact order because there are several of them that are somewhat similar in nature, so that we'll be on kind of one topic. But the first bill we're going to look at is House Bill 89, okay? And that's stabilization grant program that puts, and I'm going to just give an overview of it. It's going to put a certain amount of money in the budget for MSDE to offer grants to child cares that are have had trouble due to COVID or any other reason, to help them get stabilized and keep themselves sort of above water. The bill, we will do an amendment. It's going to be, it wasn't written this way, but I think we're going to turn it into a one-time. This is a 1-year expenditure in fiscal year 2024. Is that right, Alistair? 24 for this one?
It's actually 23. It's the current.
Right. Sorry. All right. This one's for the current year. We'll pass this, and that's right. We'll go. Well, current next. Yeah. Right. Okay.
Current budget cycle. The budget we're working on.
The budget we're working on right now for the next fiscal year. And so with that, Alistair, I'll let you tell a few of the details of how that's done and some of the priorities we put into it and some of the things we're thinking about putting into it. Try to be clear about what's there and what we're thinking about amending in.
Thank you, Delegate. So as written, the bill requires that these grants go out to child care centers that accept the child care scholarship, but otherwise only that they are those child care providers that are in danger of closing in the next 12 months. And there's not really any more specificity as to who should be prioritized in that. So rather than having a broad latitude of going to any childcare provider, there's some thought in limiting it in conjunction with the budget to go to specific providers, particularly those that have been hardest hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, that are located in areas with fewer childcare slots than others, that meet certain social vulnerability indices determined by the State Department of Education, and that serve infants among the youngest populations. And the reason to do some of this stuff is these are some of the centers that have been hit the hardest during this COVID-19 pandemic. We've received a lot of federal money to help them, and we're trying to make sure that that federal money goes to the providers who most need it at the current time.
Very good job, by the way. A number of times we've never said it that clearly between the two of us. So well done. Delegate Wilkins, I see a question. Thank you.
Thank you. Very excited about this bill, and I think figuring out some of the details that will make it work. I just wanted to make sure I understood. Is this centers and family child care providers? Both, right?
I think so. I didn't see a distinction. Is there one, Alistair? I didn't see one.
No, this is yes, that's right. To go to both childcare centers and family childcare providers and large family childcare providers.
Okay, got it.
If you're not, by the way, if anybody doesn't know what all those are, centers are usually the ones you see that look more like businesses along, in your community. Family childcare centers are often 8 or fewer students, often run out of homes, but not necessarily. And large family childcares go up to 12 students, for those of you who have not read all those little details.
Great. Do we have any sense? I just would like us to be as broad as we can be given the limited funds. Do we have any sense of how many facilities might be able to participate in this? And I also want to say, as a side note, I mentioned before, my mom is a family childcare provider in another state, and her state provided something like this, but it was very broadly available. They weren't sort of these, maybe they had more money, but there weren't sort of these, various requirements and things like that. And it worked really, really well. So I think we do have a success story in other states. So I'm really excited about this, but I'm just curious. I think we have to be careful about limiting it too much. But also obviously there's limited funds. So do we have any sense?
So I don't think the amendments we considered would actually limit it to them. We just said, I think we suggested priority. I don't know if that's better for you or not.
Okay, priority. Okay.
Right.
That's better. Okay, that sounds good.
Okay, great. Come back for another bite if you got another question. Delegate Boat.
Hey.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the questions that I have is, did we not just have a number of grants that were offered to child care facilities over the last 2 years to start with? Because my wife is the director or principal at a religious sort of school, which includes infant care and toddler care. And so they do have a component of daycare that's there. And they've received 2 grants in the last year that came from the comptroller's office. So I'm trying to understand what the need for this is right now, because she's got a waiting list a mile long of people who are looking for childcare, and so I'm not sure that this is something we really do need. Like I said, she got 2 grants, and it came from the comptroller's office. So why this?
So I'm going to let Alistair talk about where those grants that you're talking about may have come from speculatively, but I think you've answered your own question. If there's a waiting list a mile long for kids to get into a childcare, we need to make sure we stabilize the ones that exist. There'll be other bills you're going to see in a second that are going to create abilities for expansion as well. But we're way oversubscribed in the number of kids that need childcare right now. And so I think we're trying to make sure the ones that exist can continue to exist.
Well, do we have an idea of how many may have closed? I think the group that's been hit the hardest are the family childcare. I think they're the ones who were forced into a position to be closed, where the bigger facilities, these corporations, facilities like my wife, runs, they've done quite well. And I'm not sure that we need to be handing out grants to facilities like that. I think it really ought to go to, there's a lot of women who run these childcare facilities from their home. My wife actually did that years ago. This is how we paid for college for our 3 boys. And, so I do know that a lot of those mothers are single moms, and they're trying to make a living in this world, and they're struggling. They're the ones who are struggling, not these corporations. They're doing quite well. And the schools like my wife run, they're doing extremely well. And, if there's a great demand out there for it, they're paying for it. So I'm not sure, once again, why this needs to be targeted, especially to the bigger facilities.
It's not targeted to the bigger facilities. It's broadly for both, but I'm gonna bring Clinton McSherry to just speak briefly about the community child care centers. You characterize them as all being big corporations, but actually sometimes they're very small LLCs. Clinton, can you just weigh in and sort of answer Delegate Butler's concerns in a minute or so?
I will do my best, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the question, Delegate Butler. I think you're right in one respect. I think family child care providers have closed in greater numbers than the child care centers that are still operating. But the child care centers themselves are also facing very, very significant challenges with the higher cost of sanitation and health protocols, with staffing issues, and with drastically reduced enrollments that have put their survival at risk too. So, I mean, I think the pain has been shared very broadly within the childcare community, not just family providers. And I think to Delegate Ebersol's point, it's also true that in many cases, what we think of as childcare centers are not corporate. Some are, and some may be incorporated, but many run as nonprofits and certainly operate on very, very slender margins, even in the best of times. So I hope that answers your question.
About how many child cares actually, I know they're reopening, but initially about how many closed when we
that number, yes, sir. I believe that number is over 800.
Okay. So, everything we're doing here is to try to keep some open. You're going to see some other bills that are going to incent them to expand or perhaps start up. We did a bill last year on startups, which was relatively modest, but lots of things we're going for are designed toward that.
Well, the other question, which I'd like to have an answer on, is there were grants that were given to these institutions. So, and they were significant grants. I mean, my wife did quite well off of the 2 grants that she received, and it did go to help covering a lot of the extra costs, giving the teachers a bonus and things like that. So I'm just wondering, where did that money come from? And if that money was out there, then why do we need this?
Sounds like a rhetorical question. I don't really. I
It's
can
not a
attempt to answer
rhetorical
that.
question. Where did this money come from?
Okay,
Well,
can I
we're not
answer that,
really
Delegate?
okay. Let's not get too far into the weeds here. This is a new grant, and we understand. We're establishing there's a need for it here. I'm curious why you're arguing against this. The business you're speaking of might actually be one who can receive a stabilization grant under this bill, which would be valuable to keeping that open. But Alistair, did you want to say something?
Yes. So there have been 2 rounds of federal funding so far. And while it's true that a lot of childcare providers have gotten funding under those programs, there are many who were not able to. So this is additional state funding that the governor's put in the budget for this year for this exact purpose. Because there are a lot, like COVID was very hard on childcare providers in general, and there still are many that are out there suffering. So although there has been some distribution of money already, we've not reached everyone that we need to reach, I think. And that's the reason for this bill.
Yeah. And to that end, the bill actually was creating the fund year over year. And we would like to amend it to be just for this year, sort of as a stopgap for daycares that are teetering here at the end of the COVID at the supposed end of the COVID pandemic.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Delegate Griffith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you may have just answered my question. So I was looking at the fiscal note showing that it's established in 24 through 27. So you said this will only be for this year.
Yeah, we looked at it, and at the interest of fiscal responsibility, we feel if we need to do this again, we can come back and do it again. But we're going to do it for this year and see how it plays out.
Okay, because I saw them like if we have the economy could be amazing in 2024, right? God willing.
That'll be among the amendments that I'll suggest along with Alistair that you'll see on that one.
And I do want to agree with Delegate Bowler's concern. There is a situation where the rich have been getting richer in some cases in COVID due to some of these grants and a variety of programs, right? And we see, businesses, using some of this money and giving out bonuses. And I mean, far be it for a Republican to be, worried about, large business taking advantage of government programs, right? But I mean, it's the right thing. And I want to make sure this is going to the real need and the in-home folks, the folks that are scraping by, and the mom with 3 kids. the bulk of their income is I want to make sure this money goes to the right places and not to some of these larger folks that are crushing it.
Which
right
is why
now.
we sort of set up a priority list of areas where socioeconomic challenges exist, where there are not enough slots. I don't know, Alistair, is rural areas still in there because they have difficulty? Is that a later bill?
That's in a separate bill. We're considering
Okay.
many bills with many priorities. I
Right.
would say that in order to qualify for one of these grants, you have to be at risk of closure within the next 12 months. So this is not going to people who are well off, it can only go to those who are at serious risk of.
And it's up to MSDE. We're going to leave it to MSDE, the Early Childhood Division, to actually evaluate that. And we're trying to trust MSDE more these days. Okay.
My last question, I'm very sorry for taking so much
That's
time.
all right.
To cover.
I think we're going to have these sorts of questions on every one, but let's get them out of the way now. As we get forward, you might not find you have as many. We have a couple more of these kind of programs. So let's get it out right now. Yeah.
Well, my last one is just, do we have a sense of how they're going to determine that? I mean, I would assume that the daycare really have to be really transparent with their books to show MSDE that they are in danger, and, just filling out a form, I think it's got to be more than that to make sure, because we don't want, anybody to take advantage of this program. We want to make sure it's going to the right places because there's just a finite amount of funds.
And like with anything, we can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. There certainly will be, people who are less deserving who will try for it. Hopefully, we're gonna put some faith in MSD and their skill at evaluating these kinds of programs. Certainly, we could try, but I think we probably would stumble a bit in our attempts to try to find the correct circumstances. It's only for a year, and I think we're going to give it a shot. But I understand your question.
All right, thank you.
I'm looking in order that I have hands up, and I hope I'm not going out of order. Delegate Branch, looks like you're next to me.
Yes, sorry, I don't have my camera on, but if I turn it on, I'll lose connection.
Okay, stick with it then.
My question is, will there be something so that the people who've already gotten grants will not be eligible for this particular grant, or will they still be eligible even though they may have gotten the other two grants that have already come out?
I think they'll still be eligible, won't they?
Yes, assuming, but they still have to be at risk of closure. So if they've gotten grants and are still facing severe financial hardship, they will be eligible. If those grants have been successful, as it sounds like in the case of Delegate Bowler's wife, and they've been able to float the company, they will not be eligible anymore. So it will probably go more towards those childcare providers that have not received grants yet, but depending on who really needs it and who fits the priority list that we're setting.
Okay, and if they've already gotten the grant, so they have to show how they spent that, how they've allocated that money already before receiving the grant, this grant that we're talking about now.
We haven't tied them together. We could consider that.
Mr. Chair.
Hold on. Is it a point of order? Because I got a couple people in front of you.
Yeah, I just want to mention that, they're held to the grants that she had received, they were held to a very strict menu of where that money was to be spent, and they had to account for every single dime as to where it went and what it was used for, and they could only use it for certain things. So that
hopefully MSD wouldn't take somebody who had squandered their money and give them more in this case.
Yeah.
But like I said, we're placing a certain amount of faith in them on this one because this evaluation is a difficult time. These are new things for us to evaluate if people are in trouble due to COVID. And so it's going to have to be something that is a kind of a living animal. Delegate Wilkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a general comment about all of the bills that we're going to be discussing. I think that since in particular the family childcare providers, they tend to be staffed by just one person, and perhaps not all the time, but sometimes, not someone who has like a advanced degree and things like that, tech savvy. I just want to make sure that, and let me know if you think this needs to be in law or not, but that it's accessible, particularly for the childcare providers. I think that if we have challenging requirements, we have to show your books. I think that language can also be a challenge. So I think that for the family childcare providers in particular, I think we really need to make sure that it's not a super high bar and that we're very intentional for them to be able to access it. So for all of these, also, making sure that MSDE staffs it and that they're doing little calls, webinars and that there's kind of a point of contact for questions and things like that to walk people through it. In the state that I'm referencing, they had people who would call, if someone applied, they would get a call and they'd be walked through their application and make sure that they filled everything out, things like that. We may not have capacity, I don't know, but just wanted to really emphasize the accessibility, particularly for the family childcare providers.
Sort of an ombudsman at the State Department. Don't have to hire a new position, make somebody the person that kind of is available. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes.
Excellent. I've written it down.
Okay. And the language, having it in at least Spanish and English and things like that. And again, making the application simple, at least for family childcare providers.
Okay, thanks. Delegate Lasanti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question, and maybe this will be covered under some of the other bills that we're looking at today. But when you look at a facility that is in risk of closure, one might believe that that is because of the higher cost of providing the service, right? Why wouldn't we put the scholarship into the front end of that, meaning like for the funding for the parents of the children that are that need the service?
You're
So
absolutely on, and that's going to be, which one is it? 995, Alistair?
Okay.
I think that's the one that's going to. So when we get to that, see if that satisfies that concern for you or not.
All right,
Okay.
thank you.
Sure. Delegate Guyton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a question. I remember this coming up in one of our hearings this past week, and I wanted to check with the bills we're discussing today, pretty much all of them. My question is, are we requiring that these childcare centers are participating in Excels? And if so, at what level?
So our proposed amendment would not do that. However, that is a potentiality if that's something you would like to see in this. But the proposed amendment is more limited. It would be about those centers who've been, obviously someone participating in Excel would still be eligible, but who this money is aimed at is those serving infants, those who are located in regions with more childcare slots available, and those who've been hardest hit by COVID. And
These are the ones
those
who are participating in the subsidy program too.
right.
You have to be doing that. Okay.
Okay, but there's no requirement for a certain level of quality at all in the bill?
No, we don't have any Excel stuff in there, but that's worth considering.
All right, thank you.
I think we talked about that Friday when we went over this, Alistair. And I don't know, we had a lot to process. I don't know if we made a decision. So I'd be interested on the subcommittee's feelings on that too. I've made notes, and I'm going to go back over the things that I've noted before we move on to the next bill. I feel like we're there. I'm going to tell you the things I've heard is that there might need to be some accountability for how they use them in the past. We need to make sure that these grants are accessible, especially in the case of family child care providers with languages and perhaps not too odious a set of things that have to be completed to qualify or at least be considered. Maybe someone who is a contact point, sort of ombudsman at the State Department of Education. And finally, do we need to look at the quality of that and include something about Excels? I think we're going to move on from there. I was going to let somebody talk, but I think we'll just get dragged down. You can see that Chris Push is on here. She represents the community child care centers, and there was a representative. I always think of the current president, but we had somebody on the bills that you can vet some of these ideas with over the next couple of days if you want to see what they think of them. Sometimes we think about putting stuff in and we find out that it's more restrictive than we want it to be when we're really trying to do some good. And other times we put stuff in because we want to make sure we have a few guardrails that we're not being too permissive. Anybody else with questions on this one before we move on to the next bill? Okay, thank you. That was a really rich discussion. The next one I'm going to do, Alistair, is HB 993, because it's also about providing money for child care centers. And so since we're on that kind of thought process, this is a bill that provides something called a revolving loan. Revolving loans are loans that have to be paid back. So there's a certain amount of money is placed into this account. And I'll tell you where the bill says it's going to be housed and where we think it should be housed. It starts off with, I think, $15 million this year, and then 10 the next year, and then 5 the next year, placed into this account for interest-free loans for, Alistair, I don't have the bill open. So what are the 4 categories of things that they can do it on?
Sorry, acquisitions, expansions, renovations, and new construction. So basically,
really-
it's capital projects.
It's all capital improvements in this case. And they can get a loan to do these things. I think this will make it so that indeed they can expand. So this will actually let some can start up by buying a building or building a building or adding on to their building if they already exist. And the idea is that this should expand childcare. They get the loan, they have 5 years to pay it back. It's interest free. And they can even, if they're having difficulty paying it back, they can even apply for a waiver for more time. The idea then is that this fund will continue because everybody's going to pay back all their money, and we'll have this money over and over and over again to lend to people for capital improvements going forward. The money that sits does acquire interest when it's invested, but in no other way does this account grow other than investment in this case. Alistair, is that a pretty fair collection of what it was? Do you want to tell what a few of the changes are that we thought we might make?
Yes, so thank you, sir. As written, the Department of Education, the State Department of Education would be administering the fund. We were thinking that it might make more sense to have the State Department of Commerce do that since they are more proficient generally in doing that. Additionally, there's no money in here for administrative costs. We would allow that.
And just to clarify, it wouldn't take MSD out of the process. That they would work in conjunction with the Department of Commerce. They would still be evaluating and deciding and helping to decide when the loans go out. It just seemed that Commerce was better for loaning money and recollecting money in that particular case.
And MSD would still be the ones selecting which childcare providers would receive these funds. And so in this case, the bill came in with a list of eligible requirements for all people had to be participating in the child care scholarship program. But additionally, they could be in rural communities, underserved communities, areas where there are a lack of child care slots, areas that are primarily low income, and areas with children who have special needs, centers that serve them, and children's 2 and under. So
not limited to, but priority to, right?
Yeah, so the proposed amendment would give priority in that order. So first priority would be to, so as it came in, any one of those things would be able to receive a loan here. Rather than that, priority will be given first to those with fewer slots or in rural communities or underserved communities. Second to areas of high poverty. Third to centers that serve children with special needs, or I should say childcare providers who serve children with special needs. And finally to children age 2 or under.
Okay, good job. Delegate Guyton.
I apologize, I left my hand up. My question for this bill will be the same as my question for the last bill, just whether we're including excellence and quality in this.
Okay, so for 993. Okay, and Delegate Griffith.
Very briefly, thank you, Mr. Chair. So what's built in the law, what's current policy related to if someone doesn't pay the loan back or after the 5 years fails to complete the waiver for an extension?
So there's nothing, I don't believe there's anything written in the bill or the law for default. I don't know what Department of Commerce does in that case if they have a defaulted loan. Alistair, do you?
I don't know. I'm sure they have a process for getting those funds back. There's nothing here specifically that would limit whatever their normal process is one way or another, but they'd probably go to court to seek those funds if people were derelict and didn't apply for the hardship exemption.
So for now, we would say that the bill counts on Department of Commerce to be, the sort of collection agent to make sure that things get done. We deal with Department of Commerce so rarely here that I don't know the answer to that question.
Alistair, would you mind? I know you, on top of the billion things you're dealing with, is there any way you could find out for us before our next committee?
Yes.
Yeah, this would be a good one for you guys to put on your own staffs to ask to have them go to Commerce and see if they can get us an answer so you can bring that back to us. Alistair's got a lot to do. And
very good.
Yeah, so let's do that if we can here.
Thank you.
See, and I would appreciate to know the answer, Delegate Griffith. It would be a great piece of information for us. Delegate Wilkins, family child care?
You know it. Every time I raise my hand, you guys already know. So regarding the comments about Excels, if we're considering putting that in, I would like to know definitively the specific impact on the family childcare providers in terms of how many of them are at a certain level of Excels, and if there would be any impact if we put sort of a minimum or something on there. I would initially be opposed to adding an Excel requirement because I think that unnecessarily limits participation. But I just wanted to mention that if that's an amendment or something that's coming down, if we can please have this very specific information about.
Let me demonstrate my ignorance a little bit here, if I can, and ask a question. Is a program that uses the Child Care Subcommittee program, must they participate in the Excels program? They can't not, right? Delegate Guyton, I see you with an answer to that.
Right. I believe that is the case. And also Delegate Wilkins, I appreciate your concern. The Excels program, I know we heard earlier last week that participation was required for certain subsidies. Participation in like the very lowest level of Excels, I would push for higher, but I would be okay with at least being part of that program because it includes training. It is the very, very most basic needs of the child. So it's not something that requires a whole lot of work for the Child Care Center.
Let's get an answer to that question. You're our expert on board, Clinton. Can you tell us if a child care participates in the child care subsidy program, must they also participate in the Excels program? Or
Yes, sir,
can they
that is
choose
correct.
not to?
No, sir.
Okay.
It is a requirement to participate that you be published at Excel's level, at least level 1.
So Delegate Wilkins' question then becomes relevant because by putting in that they have to be part of the subsidy program, we automatically assure that they're part of the Excels program. Her concern is, are we going to establish a 1 through 5 number on them in the Excels program, and what would be the impact of that? So that's something for us to suss out a little bit if we want to do that, and if we want to do it at what level, and consider seriously the impact of that. Is it a positive impact in that we have schools to be better qualified, or is it the other side of the other edge of that sword is, do we automatically leave some groups out that might service very needy communities and very necessary communities? So is that a pretty good summation of what the question is there? Anybody want to add anything to that? All right. So there were no other big changes on this one, right, Alistair? Other than we're going to switch it over, and the amounts remain the same. And okay, and then of course we have the question about paying back your money. Who monitors paying back the money? We're going to try to get an answer to that. Okay. The next one is also another bill that provides money to people who work in childcare and people who run childcare. That's going to be House Bill 1100, which is a bonus bill for childcare workers and for childcare providers as well. This one will provide at several different levels a $500 bonus, and I'll let Alistair drill down the weeds for certain people who work at childcare centers, $1,000 bonus for other people who work at childcare centers, and then a $500 bonus to childcare centers that hire it's to help them really to find and hire new staff on their own. Those are the 3 categories. Alistair, you want to give any more details on that, and then any changes or things that we think need to be done there?
Yes, absolutely. So the first $1,000 bonus is for someone who is participating in the credential program, which we codified as part of the Blueprint for Maryland's Future bill a few years ago in section 9.5904. So in order to receive that bonus, you'd have to be participating in that. Otherwise, you would just have to be hired and put forth your best faith effort that you're going to continue to work at the place you've been hired for 6 months.
Is that the $500 one, or is that the 1,000 one?
So as written, it's the 1,000 one, but we talked about, so in an amendment, we would, I think, want to make it so that anyone getting a bonus, we'd like to see some commitment to their continuing to work.
I think for $1,000, we said someone who has worked for a certain amount of time already in childcare, or someone who is fully credentialed, because that means they've done some work toward being childcare, right?
That's right.
Is that amended? That's amended language I'm thinking of there, isn't it? I get confused about which is the bill and which is what we discussed.
So the $1,000 is for someone who currently seeks, as the bill came in, currently holds that credential or acquires it during fiscal year 2024.
Okay,
This all relates to fiscal year 2024.
okay,
We also talked about potentially having making bonuses contingent on these people's working at least half-time for the childcare centers that
20
they're.
hours a week that they, in order to receive the bonus, you have to be at least a half part-time employee. And then for the childcare centers, the person they hired, we discussed saying that the person they're hiring has to be hired to work 30 hours a week, right? Okay,
And that, unfortunately, there's a drafting error. So as it came in, there were 2 bonuses for $500. The second one is supposed to be
it's true.
not for the employees, but the centers that hire them.
For those of you who are geeks or wonks and will read to the end of that bill, it looks like the third one is for employees again, but that's a drafting error, and that switches over to childcare providers. Yes, Delegate Wilkins.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
What could it
Okay,
be?
so do they have to be actually on payroll? Because if a childcare center doesn't currently, if you're the only person, you might not regularly do payroll, and so, or know how to do payroll. So if you're hiring someone to help out for 20 hours a week, suddenly you have these funds to do that, but you've never done payroll before because it's just you. That could probably be a challenge. So I just wanted to flag and I don't know how we're planning to structure it, but that as long as you can prove that you use the funds to, maybe there's some kind of way to prove that you use the funds to provide support and that you hired someone at the 20 hours a week. I just wanted to flag that because payroll might be challenging if it's literally just you there.
So again, you're saying you don't want it to be too onerous for people to have to access this with a lot. You're just concerned about the amount of paperwork there, right? And
Right.
What has to be provided.
Yeah, because payroll is not easy to just start doing.
Okay. Are there any other comments? That's a good one. Are there any other comments on the structure? We may change a little bit, and we'll throw it toward you about how we think people qualify for the $1,000 bonus, how we think people qualify for the $500 bonus. We have a few ideas there. And when we bring those back, we can have everybody weigh in. And if you agree, fine. If we want to change them a little bit, we can, if you feel like they're unfair in some way or another. Any other comments on that one? Okay, thank you. Try to keep your heads up. We have 2 more here. I'm just saying, I don't mean you have to look at me. I just mean, drink your 5-hour energy now because we have 2 more to get through.
I'm having a great time, Mr. Chair.
Well, I am, certainly. I think what we'll do next is House Bill 995, which is perhaps the most confusing one of the lot, but also deals with making it possible for people to access childcare in one more way. And I'm going to give an overview of this. There is federal money that we pass through to people who deserve the child care subsidy at various levels when they apply for it and are approved. The State Department of Education vets them and says, yes, they do qualify. Their salary level is sufficiently low and they qualify in other ways as well. We're going to start paying for their child care or part of their child care. Problem is that the process takes a while. Doing the forms, first of all, is difficult enough. And we can't get out of that because that's required. It's federal information. And then MSD sometimes takes some time to vet and make sure that it works. So for a while, somebody who needs childcare either won't access it or will have to pay for it themselves until they're approved. And when it gets approved, it doesn't back pay from the time they started. It's just when they first get approved. So the concept of this bill is that we will have somebody sign an affidavit when they sign up saying they think they qualify and here's their salary level so that we can decide immediately that they get the program and based on what they claim their salary level is, what they would be able to earn from that. And what part of their child care or all of their child care gets paid. And we would pay that out of that federal fund and we would not have to pay that back, okay? Because if indeed they qualify, that meant they qualified all along. We just were using that money then. The only danger, and it's not a big one, is that somebody claims that they qualify and they claim a certain salary and they're in error. And when the time comes when they actually get evaluated, we find out they weren't really qualified. And we've been paying for them for, 3-4 weeks to have child care. And in that case, the state would have to take the hit. According to the data I got, this kind of thing only happens in less than 2% of the cases. So it's gonna be a very small amount of money paying for someone's childcare for a month or so. And the upside of this, the argument on the upside of this is that indeed, people who need childcare, in fact, you could argue that circularly, somebody might need childcare to actually be able to fill out the forms and get themselves ready to do all this, would be able to access it in probably, most likely, very likely, an appropriate way. Then there's the second part to the bill. And Alistair, I went through all that. And I can't remember what the second part of the bill is. So you got it.
So the second part of the bill is that if someone qualifies for one of these programs and they are participating in support programs provided by federal law or the state, including the SNAP program, the WIC program, federal housing programs, Social Security or temporary cash assistance, that they would have the entirety of their childcare paid for rather than co-payment. So the way the program, the childcare scholarship program works is it's a sliding scale based on how much money you can pay. So that's set by the State Department of Education. So for this unique population who needs assistance in a strong way, they would have no copays. And then there's a third part that I could talk about too. I'll take the lead unless someone steps in. Is
We got
that
somebody with a question? Let's stop and
okay.
see. Okay, Delegate Guyton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Alistair, for that. I just have a question for this legislation because I haven't had a chance to really study it. Is this an ongoing program or is this for a limited time?
Yes, yes, this is a current program. It's the Child Care Services Program provided by the federal government. This is Maryland's implementation of that program called the Child Care Scholarship Program.
I'm so sorry, I wasn't clear. Is the change that we're making to allow, is that permanent?
Yes, I apologize. Yes, that is permanent. And okay, so then the final thing that's being done here is that under Maryland law, in order to receive a benefit from this, you have to pursue child support. That's not a federal requirement. And so this bill would make that no longer a requirement of the state program. And then additionally, if someone, a childcare provider, sends an invoice to MSDE to cover the payments of someone, MSDE would have to pay that within 10 days. And that's the final piece. Sorry, snuck two into my third there.
Questions? The second part is more confusing to me than the first, to be sure. I have trouble unpacking that one a little bit, but I'm not sure where that funds come from for them. But I'm going to let Delegate Wilkins ask her question first, and then we'll see if we can get that sorted out. Muted.
Thank you. Just clarifying questions to understand the program. So if the person was found ineligible and the provider was paid, does the provider also have to pay back their money or lose that, so they get to keep that? Okay.
It's on us.
Okay. And so for the person, is there any sort of appeals process or kind of a hold harmless if someone in good faith, maybe they thought that they'd be eligible and now they're on the hook and it might be a huge challenge for them? Can we build in any sort of hold harmless and an appeals process kind of?
So you mean possibly keep the payments coming based on their affidavit while they appeal? Is that the idea?
Yes, and if it turns out that they didn't qualify and maybe now they're on the hook for, I don't know, like $1,000.
They wouldn't be on the hook, Delegate.
Okay.
Only going forward, they'd have to start paying for their own child care.
Oh, okay. So we would eat the cost both for.
We would. It's going to happen pretty rarely, according to what we found. It's happened in other places, and most people, report accurately, and they can pretty. The thing we're adding in, we're amending it. They have to put their salary down, and the reason for that is because it's a sliding scale. So we have to know what they make to figure out what we should be giving them. In addition to them saying they qualify. We have to make sure that we're giving them sometimes they don't get the full subsidy. They don't, it's not 100% for them.
Got it. Okay.
Any other questions on that one? Okay. Take a hard look at that second part. That's, I'm going to. Okay. I had a long weekend trying to figure these out because they were all heard on Friday and I didn't know they were all going to be coming my way so quickly. The last one's of a slightly different nature. We're going to have another bill. We have one other bill that's coming on this later, but this is a topic that deals with childcare for severely disabled students and how we handle them. Now, sir, I'm going to turn it over to you entirely. This is House Bill 725.
Yes, thank you, sir. So this is codifying the therapeutic childcare program, which is a program that MSD has been operating in recent years to provide support to children with significant developmental delays or significant disabilities. And so as this came in, this created an entitlement for that program, which is not how the current system is administered. So the idea for this one is to do away with that and instead codify the existing process of providing grants to child care providers in order to serve this population.
When you say that, are you talking about the amendment and not the bill as it came in?
I'm talking
The
about
bill
the
as it came
amendments.
in simply said facilities that take these students on and work with them currently get about $15,000 a year. The bill doesn't say that, but that's the truth. This bill said it will be $45,000 per student that they will receive for students like this. We're a little worried about how that'll play out financially at this point.
It's also a difficult thing to administer. In order to give an entitlement-based fund that's set up that goes every year, you have to have some measure of who is eligible for the program. Typically, because of the way the budget process works, that means that you have to look 2 years back. And so for a program like this, where you're serving young kids mostly, looking 2 years back, those kids are probably out of the system at that point. Additionally, it's going to create a lot more administrative work for people to find who's eligible in the past. There's a lot potentially going into that to set up the criteria by MSDE to go into every childcare center. So I think a grant system is probably the better way to go rather than.
Because let's talk about how we envision that grant program then working if schools take students that fall into this category.
So then if a childcare provider would have a student that falls into this category and they would apply for a grant from MSDE, who would pay the cost of the grant to provide services to these children at the childcare center or family childcare provider.
And who would evaluate the amount of the grant? MSDE?
MSDE would evaluate the amount of the grant.
Based on that particular child's needs?
That's right. So MSDE would evaluate that child's needs. Okay.
Delegate Guyton, I see. I think you took your hand down and put it back up again. So I think you have a question.
I did. Thank you,
Good.
Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. I'm definitely gonna have to study the changes for this one. So I was one of the co-sponsors on this bill and really excited about being able to serve these kids. My question is, we are talking now about money following the child to any child care center who says they can provide these services, when I believe initially, no. Okay, they have to be, explain that a little bit more to me, because I know we don't have that many therapeutic childcare centers. So we're not talking about a lot of different centers here. Can you explain that a little more, the changes that you're making? I'm just a little confused.
Yeah, that may have entirely been the intent of the bill, but it was not stated there. So it's a little bit unclear as it came in how exactly this money is distributed and who gets it. So that's another reason to make it a grant program. I mean, I think that could be part of how we build in the grant, depending on how you would like to see that happen. But as written, it was not clear that the money would follow the kid.
Do you mind if I ask another question, Mr. Chair?
Oh, no, I don't mind at all. Please do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for asking.
No, and I honestly wouldn't think that it should follow the kid but we need to be sure that we have some sort of evaluation for these programs also to give them that designation to get the money for those services, that they are actually providing them adequately. So that's my concern here with the grant program versus the entitlement program. I'm just not understanding exactly the difference in how that would be evaluated.
Can you help me with what you just said? How would the accountability, how would the accountability be in the way the bill is written now? Where would the accountability be in that one?
I'm going to go back and look at both of them because
Okay,
I'm a little bit confused by the conversation and the changes, but I would love to talk to you about this offline too, just to make
Right.
sure that we are.
And we're looking for those changes. For sure.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
my biggest concern is just that these programs really are qualified in providing the care that these children need if they're getting that fund, and that we really are looking at enforcement of that.
And
Thanks.
indeed, one of our concerns was that establishing a number like 45,000, but the description was pretty broad. And so it could be subscribed really seriously, but maybe not for the intended audience in this particular case. And so we really feel like this one needs to be tightened up with respect to all that. So I'd look forward to your input offline on that, Delegate Guyton. I really would.
And I think that could work as part of the grant, that you have to have a strong evaluation process that is checked later or something. But I'll talk to you later, I guess.
Yeah, that's fine though. And so that brings us to the close of today's meeting. As I said, expect a meeting later in the week where we'll take these up. We're pretty far along. If you want to talk to me or like I gave Delegate Griffith an assignment, if you want to let me know where you are on things, please do. Try. I know there'll be a temptation to talk to Alistair, but if he gets too many sets of instructions, it's hard for him to actually kind of interweave them. So it'd be better if you could go use me as a conduit to talk to him about things. I certainly will bring stuff up. And if we don't cover everything on something in the next meeting, certainly he's capable of fixing up our amendments before we take them up and go forward with them. We'll have, like I said, we have a couple other good childcare bills. We're a busy committee this year, which is kind of fun. And we got a lot to do. And I thank you all for your time. What I said in the voting about the work ethic of this group is true. I really appreciate everyone's concerns and paying attention. So keep your ear to the ground and talk to me or talk to each other as you need to about this. Okay. Thanks all very much. Talk to you soon.